Well, we got our first 1,000 kilometers done. We got our service. So I'm making a video to say, are we still happy and what mods do we have? So if you're interested in all that, stick around and I'll give you an overview, the good, the bad, and the queen of it all. I'm on the road to MT Fuji, hoping the traffic is low. So welcome back to Kaido Rider and another video with my wife's SV650. This is her first bike. I made a video about why this is her first bike, not her first big bike. You can check that out. The first thing I want to go over is mods. So I'll look for a nice place to pull over and we'll go over the mods. Okay, now that we have pulled over, let's talk about the mods real quick on this bike before we get into the review. The best mod is the seat, and I will have a video coming out about that specifically just because I don't see a lot of reviews about this seat. If you're curious about the seat specifically, stick around, that video should be coming up very soon. And on the seat is this tail bag. It's a good tail bag. It's a water resistant zipper. Right now we have rain gear in it, and you can extend the tail bag to get taller by unzipping the lower zipper. It's Kamimoto, which I think is a Chinese brand that is just budget stuff that may or may not have borrowed some design cues from others. But it had great reviews. I stand by those great reviews. It's semi-rigid, good top, water resistant. It has a very, very good rain cover right here. So I have nothing bad to say about it, and if you recognize it, it's because it was on my street triple before this bike. As far as the rear, LED brake lights came stock. We have the standard lights. There's no tail tidy on this bike. The reason is my wife likes it like this, and it does help in the rain and the mud. We have the stock muffler because her being small town Japan, she wants it quieter than it is. I am Backroads America, will not talk about how I disagree. Looking back at the seat, you have this, which just like on my Tracer 900 GT, it's a airbag connector for a hit air vest. She has one too. I think it's a great investment. Nothing in this video is endorsed. I'm not saying to get anything or not to get anything, and I'm not getting paid for anything. As of the filming of this video, my subscriber count's somewhere in the 300s, so I'm not getting paid at all. This is just me passing on info. And here we have crash bars from SW Motec. If you see, they stick out past the radiator. They will cover everything in a crash or a fall. Here they are from the other side. I have no reason to say I'm happy or upset. They feel pretty strong. We haven't crashed with them yet. And hopefully, like a good helmet, these are a waste of money. But I will say, from what I found online, these are the second lightest that you can get for the bike. They're somewhere in the 3 or 4 kilo range, but they're so low, I didn't notice a difference with or without them. And these little things are just some plastic pucks to protect it from scratching in a crash on the road. Just cheap Amazon nothings. I'll link everything in the description if you're interested. We still have the standard mirrors, but the handlebars are so narrow, there's no real reason for filtering to get rid of it. This is from Daytona. Daytona makes affordable but really high quality bike mount stuff. Like, they have bars for this bike, but we didn't go with it. Those are the ones that would be lighter. I used a similar phone mount, the Gen 1 of this phone mount, and I took it across the states for over 20,000 miles, and it's still good. It's just on my bicycle now, and it's really easy to open. There's a little red lever here if you can see it. You pull it, pops it open, pull your phone off. You have adjusters. There's a rubber gum thing that you can put over it. We don't use it. I never found a need, but it opens up pretty good. Stick your phone in, pinch it tight, and it was like 3,000 yen, like 30 bucks. And these are stock levers. Everything else is stock except for one thing, and that is the headlight. Again, the blinkers are still the standard, I think it's halogen bulbs, but the headlight we have changed. Let's find the key. There you go. Extremely bright. It's nothing special. It's a H4 headlight, I believe. I'll link it like everything else in the description. It's extremely bright. The high beam is really good. The downside is we bought a set of 2, so I think it's for a car. So you have like a small dot to the side on low beam, and then it centers. We'll see if we can spin it at some point to adjust it, but it's way better than stock. And I've noticed cars react better to me at night in Tokyo City, so you're visible. But I'm sweating like crazy. It's like 34 degrees and humid, even though I'm in this lovely mountain forest. So let's say goodbye to the trees and the hill and get back on the bike and go for a ride to talk about how it is after the first 1,000-kilometer service, and are we still proud of getting this as her first bike. Without further ado, and we're back on the bike, taking twisty corners with one hand in the air. So those are the general mods. Other than the seat, obviously none of them really play a difference here on the road in the twisties. But let's move into the general overview of the bike. And let's see how many commenters make angry comments without even getting halfway through the video. The first thing I wanted to say is that, as many people say, there's a snatchy throttle on this bike more than many others. Even though you have the throttle assist from the clutch, which is called a low RPM assist. And there's no cars, I'll show you what that is real quick. So down to first gear, we're barely moving. Look at the RPMs. That's without giving it any throttle. And it helps you not stall on a V-twin. It's a nice thing. I've been over it in other videos. It's still a nice thing. I still love it. And the throttle is less snatchy now. I'll give that to two things. The first is we did the first service. Every bike is better after the first service, except for my street triple. I think it's also just getting used to it, because it's not bad enough that you can't get used to it. The on-offness is there right now, but if I'm just gently onto the throttle, it's fine. And what I do in town, unless it's like walking speed maneuvers, I actually sit the bike in third gear, because most of the snatchiness is in first and second gear. And in third gear, it's kind of a non-issue. The bike has enough smooth torque that it'll pull around in third gear just fine. And on turns like this, I'll just say the tires, it's whatever Suzuki gave us as stock. We haven't changed them. We can't afford to throw away good tires. I have no reason to think of them as bad. I pull a handful of brake, they don't lock up. I accelerate, I lean too far or whatever. They're fine, they're good. And they're always warm because I live in Tokyo. It's the middle of summer. It's late July when I made this video. And I'm sorry if I'm jumping around too much. This is mostly off the fly. This list is barely spark notes. But when I was talking back about the throttle being smoothish now, or living with it, let's talk about the engine smoothness. Now, first and foremost, this is a V-twin, okay? If you know enough about bikes to know what that means, you understand that it's prone to some kind of shake. And I say shake because it's not a vibration, it's just that thumping V-twin character. This is not a 4-cylinder, this is not a 3-cylinder, this is not a parallel 270 degree. That should all be relatively smoother. Like I rode an Africa Twin a bit back, it's smoother. My bike, the Tracer 900 GT, is a triple, it's smoother. But it's not vibration. Like sitting on the Kosakador Japanese interstate going something like 120, the vibration is unoffensive. The vibration is largely not noteworthy. I mean, yeah, there's some, it's metal serrated foot pegs, and it's a budget handlebar and stuff, but it doesn't feel it. It doesn't feel bad. I really have nothing negative to say about the setup as far as vibration is concerned. Another thing is the transmission. As far as shifting, the clutch is not as light as my hydraulic clutch on my Tracer 900 GT. It is lighter than my Street Triple was. It's comparable to what my old V-Strom was. And I haven't had my other bikes recent enough to remember them, except for my Tiger 1050 being a very heavy clutch. So we've adjusted the clutch a little bit with the cables to make it a bit less of a pull, and it's helped her quite a bit. It took some playing to get it between that I'm gonna stall and it's just such a long clutch. From the factory it wasn't bad anyways, and the brake lever is adjustable. We adjusted it to the shortest bit needed. They're pretty good brakes, so you don't need more. But one thing I want to point out, I want to talk about clutchless shifting, because it's pretty good, and I'll find a spot where I can accelerate through it. So I'll keep my hand on the end so you can see I'm not using the clutch. And that's it. It just shifts really nice with just the foot peg. Just auto blipping, and let's blip it down. And yeah, I don't think auto blipping is the right word, but let's blip it back up. And it's just the throttle motion And any bike can do this. If you've been riding long enough, you know about that little trick. And it's just as safe as doing a quick shifter kind of shifting without the clutch if you know what you're doing. Beginners, learn it on a bike you don't care about or learn it cautiously. For me, it's great. It's fine. It's pretty much as good as a quick shifter without actually spending money. So, of course, quick shifter's better, but this is good enough that I don't care. I can get away with it. There's also the thing about the wheel size. These wheels are in the rear are 160 millimeters, not 180 like most road bikes are now, most full-size road bikes. And I kind of like it more because I noticed comparing this to my Tracer 900, which should be a much faster bike, a much more powerful bike, I can go faster through the corners on this. And I don't lean as far, and it's easier to do. And that's just physics, you know, I'm not qualified to explain it. There are some videos that go into it pretty good around the internet, but skinnier tires can enter corners at higher speeds. And it definitely shows here, even though it's not actually a skinny tire, it's a little skinnier than, say, an MT-07 or my Tracer, but I do notice the difference going back and forth between this and my Tracer. I kind of like that feature, and of course it has its other benefits of less rotating mass, cheaper tires, slightly better fuel economy. Why not? If you can get away with it. A bigger tire's for bigger power, so something like the MT-07 actually really doesn't need that wide of a tire. It's more of a fashion sense, and if you saw this year's update, fashion sense is a real big part of that bike. But since I just mentioned fuel economy, let's talk about fuel economy. I've done the math to compare it to the fuel gauge on the bike, which you can't see right now, but comparing to the actual fuel gauge and doing the math, the fuel gauge is within 0.5 kilometer per liter of accuracy in all situations. So when it says I'm getting about 22 kilometers per liter in Tokyo traffic, I tend to believe it. And when it says I'm getting 26 on the interstate Kosakador, roughly going around 100, 120 kilometers an hour, I believe it. And on these mountain roads, I'm getting right around 20. And if I were to stick it in 6th gear and just ride casually like a cruiser on a back road, you'll get a little over 30. So Suzuki's outrageous fuel economy numbers, they're realistic in many situations. And again, we just got the first service, so I haven't really commuted with it yet in the city, but the back road fuel economy does seem to be better. This time it's reading closer to 22. So like any bike, it'll get better with age, but the general takeaway there is it's an extremely efficient bike. As far as weight is concerned, it's very skinny and a bit longer than most bikes in this segment with the weight relatively low. I don't really notice the weight as a big deal. Like on my Tracer 900 GT, it's not a heavy bike, it's not bad, the weight's not terrible, but there's a clear weight difference between this. And comparing it to the Honda CB650, that felt heavier than this, but it's only like 2 or 3 kilos more. And the MT-07, yes, it's lighter, but it doesn't feel crazy lighter, and I still stand by that. So as a general point of view, do I still stand by the idea that this is the best beginner 650 bike? Yes. For all those reasons in that video and the things I've stated here, this is a tremendously fun bike. And it's really enough. It's a beginner bike that, just to cannibalize what I already said in a previous video, the main feature that makes it beginner friendly, besides the size, is the throttle assist. And I, at over 12 years of riding, also like the throttle assist. So my wife has a theory that she's not going to outgrow this bike. She's not going to be getting a bigger bike anytime in the next many, many years. And I feel like this is a bike that you can grow into. Much like the Honda CB, it doesn't have much power if you keep the RPMs low. As you get more confident, rev it up. Same with this, but it's just not a hard bike to live with. The Trident's throttle bothered me. Forget my opinions about Triumph. It's just the throttle bothered me. So as you get better, it may start to bother you. You know, the other bikes are the other bikes. That's another nice thing. You click that in, the start assist just, boom, easy. And the problem with that is it makes it hard to start my Tracer because I'll just click and be like, why aren't you started? Oh, that's right. And the throttle assist, I've stalled my Tracer a few times because I get used to this. Now that I've said all those lovely things And those of you that have bought this bike or are thinking about buying this bike think it's a perfect, amazing, wonderful bike. I want to get to something that's in the title of the video, why I absolutely hate riding this bike. And it's not clickbait, and it is clickbait. But I do have reasons I really hate riding this bike, and it's because I have a Tracer 900 GT. I've made it into a quasi-adventure naked bike, and when I ride this, it makes me think that I bought the wrong bike with my Tracer. It makes me think I wasted money on a bike. It makes me think I almost want to replace my Tracer with an SV650. And there's a couple reasons. The first is focusing on it being a naked bike, and I'll give you two sides of this based on your geography. Here in Japan, where 80 kilometers an hour can feel too fast, a naked bike's great. And the way this works as a naked bike, there's no bad wind on this bike at any speed under 120. And it's not that bad over. It just doesn't have a need for the windshield or all that. If you are doing big highway touring or riding a lot in the winter, maybe that'll be something else, and then you do want a windshield. But the smoothness of the airflow on this bike is amazing. And the lightweightness, again, I got a bigger bike, so the lightweightness isn't just my bike's bad, it's this. But as far as the heavier bike and the more power, I will add a caveat of when I had my Tiger 1050 in the States, and I hit the lower 48 at interstate speeds all over the country in like less than 3 months. Yeah, that bigger bike, that more power for all that luggage was lovely and pretty much necessary. Whereas this above 120 or even at 120, the lightweightness can almost feel a bit troublesome. And I would imagine the shorter wheelbase of the Trident or the MT creates even more problems for that. If you live in a country where your highways are big like American interstates and you're going over 120 all the time, you commute at those speeds, yeah, a bigger bike might be nice. But here in Japan, this bike makes me regret buying such a big bike. And I don't want to just drop the size down to the MT-09, which is finally in Japan as of today. It's still going to have that big raucous engine, which is more power than you'll use. And that's the next thing. Do I notice a lack of power on this bike because I own the Tracer? Yes. But after I ride this for about 10 minutes, at no point do I ever think this is lacking in power. And it's not just having power, you know. If you're going to get mad at me about statistics and stats, look up your own stats. This isn't a stat video. I'm going off of the Japanese Suzuki website. So according to the Japanese Suzuki website, this is making 64 Newton meters of torque at 198 kilograms with 75 horsepower, and I find it tremendous. Unless you're doing ridiculous over 120 speeds. And on a road like this, which is where most of my riding is, other than commuting to work at city speeds, this is ideal. It's usable power. And what I mean by usable is I leave my Tracer in low power mode, not because of my sexuality, as some commenters have suggested, but because you cannot use all the power, even in the low power mode, without risking your life and the life of those people around you. I can ride this bike at its full potential and be safe, still having fun, having more fun, because bikes are fun at their limits, not at half their limits. And I would assume the MT-09 would just amplify that if I traded my Tracer for that, just to get the smaller, lighter weight, proper naked bike. But this has usable power. It doesn't have the upside down forks, but I think its suspension is amazing, especially for unadjustable. It's the best non-adjustable suspension I've enjoyed. And its brakes, they work great. They do everything I need them to do. They don't have any need for improvement as far as road riding. And I don't mean to say that they're good enough brakes, because I'm not saying they're good enough brakes. I'm saying now I'm going 60 kilometers an hour and let's just stop. They're good brakes. They're plenty good. If I didn't have these trucks in front of me, or if I found a passing zone, I could use the brakes more sporadically. I'll add maybe a little bit of B-roll at the end if I can find that option. There's nothing bad about this bike as far as what it is. There are a few things that make it feel cheap, not as much as the MT-07 feels cheap when it's literally wrapped in plastic. This is a real metal tank. This is a real trellis frame. This is the only thing that makes me think it's cheap, because you can see the gaps around the speed clock. But from the front, it's a nice little cowling to have that makes the bike look nicer. If you look for cheap stuff on this bike, you will find cheap stuff on this bike, but I'm saying that it doesn't feel cheap if you don't look for it. I mean, yeah, the lights, the blinkers, but again, those are super cheap, super easy upgrades. It's just so good, it's making me regret a bigger, more expensive, more put together bike. That's a compliment to Suzuki and a slam on Yamaha, and maybe something wrong with me. But I will add a bit of, I'm not quite ready to trade my Tracer for this, because there's a few things about it, as I've stated in other videos, that do make me want it. The first would be traction control, because I don't need 6 levels of traction control, I just need on and off. Because commuting on bad roads in the rain, it's a nice thing to have. It's that little bit of safety. I know some people like these bikes because they're bare bones. They say you don't need ABS. I disagree. Feel free to have your own opinion, but I would like to have that. A smoother throttle, and admittedly Triumph makes the smoothest throttles, but if you look at my Street Triple Short ownership playlist, or if you've been following the channel long enough, you know that I will almost definitely never buy a Triumph again, and I wouldn't recommend it either. It was such a bad ownership experience, I can't in good faith even consider looking at a Triumph anything. That is what it is. Don't hate me for my bad experiences. Spend your money your way. But the other thing I do miss on my bike versus this, I have cruise control. And so many people say, you don't need cruise control on a motorcycle. Well, then why do you need it in your car? It's nice to be able to just let go of the throttle and not lose all your speed. I'm the kind of guy that'll do 10-hour days for fun. Cruise control takes the straightaways and the highways down to a very convenient point. And I'm not saying Suzuki has to make the reiteration of this bike a super expensive has-everything bike, but maybe if Suzuki made it where those were options, or the MT-07 had an SP version with those things like cruise control as options. Because a big part of why I have a Tracer 900 GT is, to the best of my knowledge, it is the smallest motorcycle on the market that has standard cruise control. And yes, you can add it to some bikes if you want to void your warranty. I'm not ready to void any warranties yet, and these bikes are still too new. That's why I really don't actually want to ride this bike anymore, because in isolation, my Tracer's a great bike. When I ride these bikes back to back, I regret the bike I bought. I don't know if you should expect many more videos of this. There should be a few coming out right now, because of the convenience of getting out of the city and filming, but I'm going to try to avoid riding this bike from here on so that I can enjoy my bike more. We don't have the money to replace my bike right away today. If that's a cop-out answer, sorry. If you're looking to get this bike, I can't think of any reasons not to get it, for the exception of what I listed, like if you're touring on interstates all the time, or if you're gonna go off-road, this might not be the bike for you. You know, there's obvious reasons not to get this bike, but if you don't fall into those obvious categories, as someone who is watching this video, I assume you don't, this is an amazing bike, and this might be the best road-focused bike in Japan, in my opinion. So, with the limitations that I'm now used to traction control, I'm used to cruise control, you know, I can get around the snatchy throttle. I pretty much have on this. But with those two caveats, I am not trading in my bike for this bike yet. B-roll on the twisties. I just can't imagine ever needing more than what this bike offers. And brakes. It's not even full brakes. So, till next time, this has been Opinions from an American in Japan. Thanks for watching.